like to bring this meeting to order, the April 21st, 2021 virtual Village Council meeting. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Pursuant to Executive Order 20-69 issued by Governor Ron DeSantis, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by Section 120.54(5)(b)(2) of the Florida statutes. The meeting will be opened with a moment of silence. Can we please have a moment of silence? And now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to the
republic for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For this April 21st, 2020 virtual council meeting, the Miami Shores Village Council is convening by Zoom as posted on the village's public notice, which also identifies how the public may view, listen. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. The agenda and all supporting documentation are available on the village's website. In order to ensure that the public has the ability to view and listen to the meeting, the village is broadcasting the meeting through all the usual communication channels that are provided when a village council meeting is held fully in council chambers at Village Hall. This includes live streaming via the village website, Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, Public Stuff, YouTube, and Twitter. Additionally, the meeting is also available on Comcast Channel 77 and YouTube the day after the council meeting. You may also listen to the live meeting by calling the dedicated Zoom phone line as indicated in the public notice, and I will call upon our clerk to call the roll.
So the record reflects those who are present. I will now call the roll. Village Attorney Serafan.
Present.
Village Manager Benton.
Here.
Councilman Brady.
Here.
Councilman Lafredo.
Here.
Councilman Meltz.
Here.
Vice Mayor Burt.
Present.
Mayor Wagger.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you. We will now move on, Madam Clerk, to our e-public comments, and I will provide some guidance here. To provide a reasonable opportunity for public comments, the village has encouraged the public to submit written comments prior to the start of the meeting using the village's new e-comment function. The village clerk will read e-comments into the record. Please note, as the presiding officer, I may exercise the authority to limit the length of time of public comments in the interest of time and to preserve decorum and order. Please note, public comments is not a Q&A forum. Therefore, if you have any questions, please contact individual council members and/or staff after the meeting. However, all comments will be included as part of the official record for this virtual meeting and will be considered by the Village Council prior to any action taken. All interested parties are required to abide by all state, county, and local emergency orders and are urged to remain home and practice social distancing. If the proposition is being continued or rescheduled, the opportunity to be heard at such a later date before the Village Council, there will be an opportunity before an action is taken on such a proposition. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
The first public comment is from Patricia Bonaduce. Good evening, council members. Hope you're all in good health and thank you for your efforts working for the village, even during quarantine and lockdown. My name is Patricia Bonaduce. I own a real estate company on 2nd Avenue. As you know, I'm also a member of the Historic Preservation Board. My commitment with the village cannot be fuller as I live, work, and volunteer here. Due to the COVID-19 world pandemic, the federal government mandated the closure of almost all businesses, and we have no knowledge about when we can reopen and continue with our commercial activities. Even though my business applied to SBA loans as a disaster relief, the federal government ran out of funds and millions were left out of this benefit. My investment on 2nd Avenue was determined by the attractive of all the commercial boom I witnessed during 2019, and I keep bidding to this great downtown area. But we need help to maintain our businesses while being closed and unproductive. Otherwise, we will witness a lot of out of business signs and our downtown might have a setback slow to be recovered again. Landlords shouldn't suffer financially during these troubled times either. With all these facts briefly explained, I respectfully appeal to council members to approve the loans for businesses on 2nd Avenue as an emergency resource to preserve the business district at Miami Shores Village. Thank you so much. Next speaker is anonymous. I've made about 3 calls and sent this email to several people in Miami Shores Village, but haven't received any kind of answer at the moment. To whom it may concern, I live in Miami Shores along with my family on the east side of our beautiful village. Over the last days, as a result of the stay-at-home measures, I happened to notice several people around our neighborhood running, walking, cycling, and even driving around. Clearly, some of them are neighbors, but we can tell several are not. We even had a couple ask us for the code to the exit through the gate on 104th and Biscayne. And then again, 2 women asking us for the same code. Mind you, we do not live on the street. We've seen a family of 4 having an improvised picnic in front of a vacant home. And I'm sure many others I see around are not from our area. I've reached out to the local police since the increased traffic during a pandemic is opposed to what's being recommended, and it adds to the already worrisome issue of security and crime. I do not know what the solution is, but I'm sure there are things that can be done to minimize access to those who do not live or do not need to deliver or provide services in the area. The continuity of our safety is in your hands. And if there's anything I can do to help with this matter, please let me know. Thank you for your time. Next speaker is Patrick Huber. The east side of Biscayne is having a problem with people who are not from the area driving in and walking our streets. We are also having a problem specifically around Bayfront Park with people congregating in the closed park and the streets and yards adjacent. No one is monitoring the cameras at the park and the whole neighborhood lacks routine patrols. Next comment is from Amina. Hello, my name is Amina and I am the chef co-owner with my husband of Coke Gourmet. I would like to know if you have a plan beside a loan with our landlord. I can't personally survive this crisis. Paying full rent and losing money every day, I open my door. I love to serve the community. I love my job, but I cannot afford to pay the rent without operating at 100%. I'm doing delivery and takeout, but that can't pay my bills. Thank you. Next speaker is Joseph Salzberg. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members, good evening and thank you for the opportunity to submit comments on item 6A, the proposed revised ordinance on single-use plastic water bottles. Thank you to Village Administration for making themselves available for discussion on this item and for their willingness to work with the beverage industry on our suggested drafting edits that are contained within the revised item before you. We look forward to working with the Village as this policy moves forward. On behalf of the Florida Beverage Association and the American Beverage Association, we have sent amendment language as well as supportive documentation to the Village Council, Village Administration. Our hope is that the ordinance will be amended to, number 1, differentiate between single-serving plastic water bottles made from low to no-value plastics and those which are made from PET. PET products are a highly valuable commodity that can be collected and reused or repurposed into new products. A similar differentiation is outlined in the City of Orlando's policies. Please see the attached documentation highlighting the substantial production and recycling benefits of PET. Number 2, limit the ordinance to prohibit the sale and distribution of single-serving plastic water bottles, rather than also prohibiting the use where the enforcement would fall upon the end consumer. Number 3, restart the 120-day period of providing written warnings found in Section 15-15, subsection 2, upon adoption of the revised ordinance. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, public education efforts prescribed in the original ordinance have understandably been impaired. These are challenging and uncertain times. We understand there are more pressing matters in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet we appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on this item, which affects our industry and customers. We look forward to working with you further and offer ourselves as a resource on this item and anything else the village may need. Sincerely, Joseph R. Salzberg, Gray Robinson, PA. Next public comment is from Elizabeth Yellen. As a business owner, I'm grateful for this initiative. I strongly encourage City to perform a survey to determine the need of businesses in the shores. Number one, 300K or 400K is not enough. Such amount should be increased. Number two, I disagreed with loan proposal availabilities based on the business category. See reference lines 2, 3, 4 for Mr. Lafredo's memorandum. In order to help most of the businesses, the cap should be the same up to 25K per borrower. Number three, emergency funds should prioritize help small businesses with no more than 6 employees, since this type of business had fewer opportunities to get a traditional loan. Number four, a mandatory denied letter from a bank or SBA should be a requirement. Number five, disagree with number 5 of memorandum. Instead of upon approval, funds should be granted in one lump sum. Number 6, agree with number 6 and number 7 of memorandum. No further comments. Number 7, partial disagree with number 8 about this regard. I suggest considering a full picture of such particular business. It will depend if the business belongs to corporate, is a franchise, or is just a dealer. In my humble opinion, emergency funds should only be available for a business that operates in Miami Shores, taking into consideration that each business in the shores brings a particular service to this community and other surrounding areas, and behind each of them are families that depend on such income. The pandemic arrived suddenly, hitting our economy so drastically and changing our life. Because of that, the city should help keep those businesses alive. This is a time to be present for us. The next speaker is Patrice Smith. Mayor Wagner and members of the Miami Shores Village Council. At our April 20th, 2020 board meeting, the Greater Miami Shores Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors passed the following resolution, urging you to consider the following recommendations to assist our community's small businesses during this challenging time. Resolution 01-2020, number 1, dedicate a staff person at Village Hall to assist our local businesses in navigating all available loans and grants, both at the village, city, state, and federal level. Bear University has indicated it will help the village identify resources should staff need assistance. Number 2, support Councilman Lafredo's proposed loan program, provided that target geographic area is expanded to include businesses throughout Miami Shores. Number 3, develop a tax abatement program for the owners of commercial properties, provided that any property owner who receives an abatement must pass on those savings to their small business tenants in the form of a minimum of a 50% rent reduction. We heard from numerous small businesses who have requested breaks from their property owners without receiving any concessions. Number 4, pursue the creation of a micro grant program ranging from $1,000 to $2,500 to help businesses adapt to the new format of conducting businesses virtually and online. These grants could help offset the cost of technology, training, and other necessary adaptations. The Chamber feels strongly that investing in our small businesses now is a way to mitigate village losses in the future. In our discussions with our more than 200 members, they indicated that securing funds from the Small Business Administration or any kind of rent reduction from their landlord has proven to be challenging or impossible. We trust that the Village Council Administration will devote the resources necessary to ensure the long-term livelihood of these businesses who invested so faithfully in Miami Shores. On behalf of the Greater Miami Shores, I thank you for your consideration. I want you to know that we stand at the ready to partner with the village in the execution of these recommendations. Sincerely, Patrice Gillespie Smith, President of the Greater Miami Shores Chamber of Commerce. Next speaker is Tony Lockhart. Dear council members, as the owner of Salon Dahlia, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the consideration you are showing the small businesses of the shores. I read Mr. Lafredo's proposal, and I'm extremely grateful for his efforts on behalf of the merchants located on Northeast 2nd Avenue. I truly hope that you will be able to offer aid as he has thoughtfully suggested. Local help is truly essential without it. Many of us will struggle to reopen and sustain our businesses. With regards to the amounts Mr. Lafredo suggested, I respectfully submit that all businesses need to be funded equally. Salon Dahlia has 12 employees and over 1,000 local residents depend on us. Due to COVID-19, we have been forced to fully close. We have 0 income. We are able to reopen, when we are able to reopen, it will be months before we can fully be operational. Social distancing in a beauty salon will certainly be a challenge, but I have been running on my shop in the Shores for a decade now. I have invested my heart into my Shores business and never had to ask for any help before. I am now humbly asking, and I hope that you will find a way to help us. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Tony Lockhart, Salon Dahlia. The next speaker is Todd Headley. As a resident and a small business owner in the Shores, keyword being and, I'm very curious why the favoritism of Northeast 2nd Avenue, especially to restaurants. Do the owners of the restaurants also live in the Shores like my business partner and I do? Why do they need the most money when in fact restaurants are the only businesses able to stay open by serving takeout? So giving an opportunity at more in comparison to other businesses that were forced to completely shut down is very insensitive. Our business was not able to use Uber Eats, Postmates, or our own delivery service for the last 6+ weeks. If loans are given, it should be for all businesses in the Shores that had no chance at earning revenue during the COVID-19 shutdown. And if it does in fact take place, those owners who live and work within Miami Shores should get priority. That being said, I understand where Mr. Yannikakis from Amaranthine is coming from, and I feel for every small business that is struggling at this time. In fact, my wife and I currently own and operate 3 small businesses, none of which made it in the first round of SBA funding through our current bank, Chase. If the restaurants are able to get upwards of $50,000 loan, I want my Miami Shores business to have the same opportunity as we are owned by 2 Miami Shores residents. Then I want the same promotion and favoritism shown to us from the Village Council once things reopen. We also would be willing to agree to similar terms as Mr. Yannikakis proposed should any funding arrive from the next round of SBA stimulus loans for our business. While I can appreciate the gesture proposed by Mr. Lafredo, you should look at the entirety of Miami Shores businesses. It gives the priority to the ones that have residents as owners and not just a few blocks from Northeast 2nd Avenue. Sincerely, Todd Headley, Ralph Jacob of Cycle Jab. The next speaker is Sarah Vahan. I would like to thank Mr. Lafredo at the council for making Miami Shores small businesses a priority at this time. It would be a tragedy if we lost the momentum of what has been happening over the few years in the downtown area. The support of locals and council is necessary for Pebble and Vine to continue to move forward, and we would be grateful for this assistance. We have been unable to get relief from other programs or our landlord. Next speaker is Hernan Palizas. Glad this proposal comes for your consideration. All businesses in Miami Shores with less than 6 employees must be taken care of in the first place. The business should be allocated along 2nd Avenue in order to apply. The fund should have a cap up to $25,000 max. Fund really should help small businesses, meaning they are small in size and revenue, because a traditional loan or grant is not available for them. Next speaker is Giselle Kovac. I fully support the village giving loans or grants in order to sustain the downtown area. It is essential that a viable plan to do so is created. The plan of how best to support businesses must be a collaborative effort with the business owners. This is a critical moment for Miami Shores, and I encourage the village administration to work together with the merchants to come up with an innovative solution based on need. Communication is key. I also encourage the village to offer incentives to landlords to adjust or defer rents at this time. Rent is currently the biggest financial burden for many of our businesses. Finally, in Councilman Lafredo's plan, MTC has entirely been left out as it is not for a profit business. I must stress what I am sure you already know. The success of our downtown depends on the success of the theater. We also need access to assistance ASAP. I would like to suggest that MTC receive a grant from the village and a council member join our board of directors in a permanent ongoing position, using this moment to create an innovative new relationship between MTC and the village. This will then remove MTC from the loan scenario and help us move forward together. My deepest gratitude for the service of this council's members during this time. It is greatly appreciated. Stay well. Madam Mayor, that concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Shall we move on to the approval of minutes?
Item 5A, approval of the March 17th, 2020 Village Council meeting minutes.
Do I have
I'll move approval.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Just for the sake of ensuring that the record is clear, I'll just do a roll call vote, Madam Mayor, if it's all right with the council. Mayor
Absolutely.
Wagger,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Birch,
Yes.
Councilman Brady,
Sorry. Yes.
Councilman Lafredo,
Yes.
Councilman Meltz.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item is 6A, an ordinance of the Village Council of Miami Shores Village, Florida, amending the Miami Shores Village Code, Chapter 15, Article 2 by revising Village Code Section 15-13, providing for definition by revising Village Code Section 15-14, providing for the prohibition of single-use plastic water bottles in a village facility or on village property by revising the Village Code Section 15-15, providing for enforcement and penalties by revising Section 15-16, providing for rights of violators, payment of fines, right to appeal, failure to pay civil fine or to appeal, and providing for an effective date. This item is sponsored by Councilman Jonathan Meltz.
Councilman Meltz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This ordinance has been on the agenda for at least 2 prior meetings. There's been some changes as a result of conversations with the council and with the village attorney. And maybe it's best if, Mr. Serafin, are you able to alert the council as to what changes are in this draft, which is presently on the agenda?
I can do that. Hold on. There. The agenda package included a red line that identified the changes. They're very simple. We changed the phrasing so that we focused on single-use plastic water bottles as opposed to bottled water. This was a suggestion from the industry that seemed to make sense. So we built that in. We clarified as to the prohibition on village-located events that the restrictions are not intended to apply to village streets and sidewalks, except to the extent that sidewalks are adjacent to a village park or village facility. In other words, just because the village owns a street and a sidewalk doesn't mean we're necessarily going to enforce it on that street and sidewalk. But if you're walking on the sidewalk at Memorial Park during an event, that's a different story. We also changed, although it's not highlighted, I noticed, in one of the whereases, the first, second, third, fourth whereas made it clear that we recognize that single-use bottles made of plastic number 1, which is PET, and plastic number 2, HDPE, are indeed recyclable. And the village encourages such recycling and provides bins for such recycling. But that for whatever reason, many such bottles are not recycled. And I believe some of you have heard from the lobbyists, the industry trade groups, and perhaps the biggest difference between the lobbyist and your village staff in talking about proposed changes to this, and it was made clear, I think, in the public comments from Mr. Salzberg, is that they want to focus more on recycling. And our perception of the purpose behind this ordinance when first adopted by the village was that it was more a pollution focused ordinance. The fact that a bottle may be perfectly recyclable counts for very little if it and 500 of its closest friends are floating in the bay. So those are essentially the changes that we built in, the ones that we thought were consistent with the purpose.
Councilman Meltz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Serafin. And just to give the overall, as the fellow council members know, the gist and the thrust and the intent of this is to reduce pollution. We're trying to do something to show our commitment to the environment, something to do our part within the community to reduce the plastic single-use bottles that we find on the ground, in the bay, in our waterways, in our streets. And this by saying on our village property, in our village facilities, we want you to use reusable water bottles. We've made a commitment to educate residents. We made a commitment to improve our infrastructure and to put recycling stations or refillable water stations. Mr. Benton has made a commitment to getting those onto village properties. So basically, anywhere where we're going to say that you cannot use single-use plastic water bottles, there will be an ability to get water. Nobody's going to die of thirst. Nobody's going to be without. We're going to encourage our schools and our camps to the children to learn about reusing water bottles. We're also going to, once things get back up to hopefully normal, to partner up with businesses to have water available throughout the village for other residents to use their water bottles, whether they're walking or biking or whatever it may be. So it's really just a global approach to do our part in Miami Shores to try and stop this global problem of just waste and destroying our environment.
Thank you, Councilman Meltz. Does anyone have comment? Councilman Lafredo?
Yeah, I thought we already passed this on 2 readings. This would just be technical amendment to clear up some language at the request of the association?
That's correct.
Great question. Vice Mayor Birch?
One comment, and that is that we did a count in that 2-block area when we did a cleanup in the Biscayne Canal. There were 83 bottles found. I'm sure that people would have recycled them or could have recycled them. The problem is that's where they ended up. We personally saw it, and we were all thinking that this is the best solution. Notwithstanding industry concerns, I think the changes are quite adequate. I'd be glad to be your second, Councilman Meltz.
Any other comments? Okay. You seconded the motion, Vice Mayor Birch? Is that what I heard?
Well, we
Madam
need.
Mayor, there's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor? Okay. All in favor?
No, there is no motion on the floor.
Oh, there is. Do we have a motion to move this ordinance?
Councilman Meltz.
Councilman Meltz.
I'd move it forward as articulated for approval.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Madam Mayor, just for the record, I will call
Roll call.
the roll. Councilman Lafredo.
Yes.
Councilman Meltz.
Yes.
Councilman Brady.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Birch.
Yes.
Mayor Wagger.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 7A, discussion of possible action regarding emergency loan fund for Northeast 2nd Avenue businesses. This item is sponsored by Councilman Stephen Lafredo.
Okay, may I go ahead?
Yes, Mr. Lafredo.
Okay, I'd like to read my memorandum into the record just for the benefit of those that don't have it. And it's a letter to Tom dated April 14th requesting this agenda item, stating writing to request that an item be placed on the agenda for the April 21st council meeting under my sponsorship. The title of the proposed item is Discussion and Possible Action Concerning the Establishment of an Emergency Loan Fund for Northeast 2nd Avenue Businesses. As you know, I have a very strong feeling about the health and vitality of the Northeast 2nd Avenue Business District going back to 1986 when I was the chair of the Downtown Revitalization Board. This continued for many years, including my proudest achievement of getting the sidewalks widened and the roadway narrowed in 2007. I should parenthesize this by Al Davis may be turning over in his grave for me taking credit for this because Al, JC, Herta, and Hunt had played big roles in this, but we did get it done. Okay, going back to my memo. This paved the way for a rebirth of the business district, or rather only began to. All of our hard-fought progress was undone by the Great Recession. Now, in the past few years, due to the efforts of the prior councils, especially the vice mayor, who was the former mayor, and Matt Glynn, who was also the former mayor, we finally have a thriving business district in Miami Shores, unlike anything seen here since the 50s and 60s. Then, as we all know, COVID-19 has happened. This threatens to undo and destroy years of patient and dedicated work by many dozens of people. I have previously provided the council with a proposed plan to establish an emergency loan fund for the small businesses on Northeast 2nd Avenue. At the time I made this proposal, which was on March 17th, I listened to other members of the council who stated that we should give some time for the state and/or SBA loan programs to afford these businesses relief. Therefore, I took no further action at that time. Regretfully, these latter programs are about as responsive and maneuverable as the Exxon Valdez. As far as I know, no one has been able to get these loans and will not at any time soon. For that reason, I would like the council to consider the establishment of an emergency loan fund along the lines of my original proposal. I should also point out I added I'd like to read the proposal into the record in a moment so that just to have a starting basis for discussion. But I should also point out that I asked the manager to submit 2 supplementary articles from the Miami Herald. One was from last week when the SBA loans ran out. It didn't mention in the article, but people like Shake Shack and Ruth Chris got multi-million-dollar grants or loans from the program. And the program was gone within a few hours. And also the state program of the $50 million that the governor put forward, 38,000 businesses applied, only 1,000 got it. And as far as I know, nobody in Miami Shores, including the country club, or the Miami Shores Presbyterian Church School, have received any benefits from any of these programs. Okay, that said, I'll just read into the record the original proposal. Keeping in mind, I've heard these comments, which I just heard today. This is the original March 17th memorandum. And I basically said to the council, I'm writing to request your consideration for the establishment of an emergency loan fund to benefit the businesses on Northeast 2nd Avenue. The reasons for this request should be obvious. The social and business disruptions of the last weeks, and especially the last 5 days, have been enormous. I should point out that the NBA canceled their season on March 11th. March 12th, we had, I think, Major League Baseball come through. The courts I know were closed on the 16th. So this was when everything hit the fan, was that particular weekend. They threatened to destroy years of work by the village, the Chamber of Commerce, and civic-minded individuals to create a thriving business district on Northeast 2nd Avenue. The general outline of this proposal is as follows. 1, the creation of an emergency loan fund, emphasis on emergency, of between $300,000 and $400,000. Loan limits of $50,000 each for the 2 new and large restaurants. Loan limits of $20,000 each for the smaller restaurants. Loan limits of $10,000 each for other small businesses, depending on size. Upon approval, each applicant will be able to draw 1/5 of their loan amount each month starting on April 1st and continuing until the loan funds in their account are used up. The loan funds would be at 1% interest payable in a 3-year balloon, which, by the way, is higher than what the Fed is charging right now. Personal guarantee of the proprietor senior partner would be required. I talked to my wife last night about this provision, and she said a lot of people don't understand why it's in there. Well, if you have a corporation and you loan them money and they go out of business, you're on the hook for the money. You're out of luck. If you get a personal guarantee, as all developers have to give when they do a condominium project or any major project or any major lease, they're personally responsible, which means you go to the end of the note period, which is 3 years, and then you have a 5-year statute of limitations. So they're on the hook for the money for 8 years. And if they don't pay it, the only way to get out from under it would be to declare a personal bankruptcy, which most people, notwithstanding what you read in the papers, most people are loath to do that. So it's pretty good security if you have somebody, and you can find that out because they're registered on Sunbiz, who the principal owner is or who the principal partner is. So that's what 7 is, the reason for 7. Number 8, the loan fund would not be available to national brand businesses. Such businesses should, we would hope, have the financial resources to deal with the emergency. Also, it was to try and keep the limit on how much was lending, because I'm sure we're going to hear from administration about our own financial trouble, but I'll have comments to address to that. But the idea was to keep it as an emergency fund to try and keep people carried through the next 4 or 5 months. By the way, I should point out that I was not approached about doing this. I thought it up myself. So because I did think it up myself, I'm very amenable to amendments or better ideas. But the idea, I've been in business on Miami Shores, Second Avenue as a professional, and I don't include professionals in this because we could still work. We could still stay open during this crisis, no matter how tough it became for us, and it's been very tough. But I could still do business. These restaurants, retailers, they were closed down completely. But I'd be open to any suggestions or amendments or other proposals. But I feel very strongly about this. I don't think we can let these people go down, and turn our backs on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Lafredo. Comments? Councilman Meltz, is that you, or should I start off? Councilman Meltz?
Feel free, Madam Mayor. I'll go second.
All right. Let me say this, Councilman Lafredo, that I think what you're proposing is important. And I know that everyone is hurting. My heart goes out to our business community, specifically in these times, these challenging times. And we have been trying to do everything we can, I know individually, to try to assist some of the small businesses here in Miami Shores. And I know you're open to ideas, but I wanted to say, when you brought this to us originally, I think one of the issues we had with it was the lack of detail, the lack of criteria. And so it comes back to us in the same way that you presented it. So to me, this is an idea and not quite a program. And the difference in the treatment of the various businesses is very arbitrary and without specific criteria. I feel like that there's some disparate treatment amongst our business community. And I'm concerned that as written, it could open the village up for, liability for picking winners and losers without any rules, without any criteria. And I know that since the village has had a history of being financially responsible, there is an assumption that this would be easy for us to do. I have a lot of questions here, but given the fact that we don't know how long this is going to go on, and we have a lot of people in our community who have lost their jobs and are having difficult times meeting their basic needs, such as paying their own rent, their mortgages, does that open us up to being responsible for those villagers too? I'm looking at the village as a whole. We represent everybody. Now, as for criteria, since this is very nebulous and very not narrowly tailored at the moment, is there an obligation? What are we going to put in play, and how do we do that as a board, as a body? What obligations are we going to put upon these businesses as we open it up, if we open it up, to have they gone through the state or federal program? Would that be criteria? What expenses would we fund? Are we funding rent? Are we funding back rent? Are we funding for equipment? Are we funding for employees? Are we funding for salaries? Are we funding for rent? How do we prioritize the businesses that we've tried to, that we would like to service? How do you prioritize that? We had a great comment earlier that, restaurants are one thing, but they do have some capacity. What about the businesses and entities here that don't have the capacity to be online and or use Uber Eats? That's a very good point that was made. I'm concerned with the amount that we're proffering right now. I'm concerned that when I did my research with my colleagues across the state, that we are offering a lot of money, and I haven't heard anything from our village manager as of yet as to what we can and can't do. But that's also a concern of mine because that's not shown in this document. Again, criteria: who's eligible? It's very unclear. It's not narrowly tailored, and you say that franchisees or national chains are not eligible, but what about the franchisee that set up Subway, for example? I mean, that's somebody's personal, probably hard-earned money that set that up. I don't know how we can. It needs to be a lot more streamlined. It needs to have a lot more detail. It's very nebulous right now. Who's going to administer this program within the village? I know there's some talk of having a full-time staffer here, but we need to be realistic with the resources that we have currently at the village. We need parameters. How are we going to look at financials? Who's going to qualify for this? How many employees do you need to have to be eligible? What do you have to present to us to show us that you are, that we should give you a loan or a grant? Have we spoken to landlords? Do we know if they've applied for federal loans or state loans? And does that affect how we go forward with such a program? Have we asked for landlord cooperation? I mean, these are all just questions that I have in my mind to sort of narrow the scope of this, because it seems so incredibly broad and so incredibly unencompassing of all of the businesses. And I realize that I think we do need to show some responsibility or help as best we can, but the parameters we would need to set. And I would say, you know, I've looked at programs, for example, in North Miami, where they have their own CRA, or I've looked at programs in St. Pete. St. Pete has a program, but they also have a bigger coffer, and they're working with a larger reserve fund than we are. But at the same time, those folks are those cities, and I'm only using those two because I could name some others, but the top of their loan or grant range is $5,000, as opposed to what you have written out here. So, I mean, we'd have to think through this in a much more detailed fashion. And I am open to any suggestions. I know that I have several meetings set up to try to figure out solutions for our businesses here as a whole. But then how do you deal with the folks that are living here in Miami Shores who have businesses at home? Do they count? Or the businesses that are not on Northeast 2nd? Are we talking about doctors and dentists? I mean, it's very, very broad. It's very, very broad, and that has me concerned. But having said that, I want to hear what the rest of the council has to say. I do have a direction for staff. I would like to ask the manager for more information. I would like to be able to direct the manager to leave this meeting and find a source of funding, find a source for us to work with, but with parameters. I think now we need to be creative, and we have to be careful about how we're going to set forth something like this and the inclusivity or the exclusivity of it either way. So I would like to, I'll start there, but those are my concerns with this. I do think in this time we do need to try to assist if we can, but this is just way too broad for my taste. And I would even be willing, I would say this out loud, I would also be willing to, because of the urgent nature of this, I would be willing to call a special meeting to sort of go through some options. But right now, as written, I would need a lot more information. But I guess my proposal right now, or what I would say, is going forward, I would love to ask the manager, direct the manager to come back to us with a source of funding or something that we could be helpful to the businesses with. But I don't know that number either. I don't know if you've gotten that information, Councilman Lafredo, but those are thoughts off the top of my head. I certainly have more to say. I do think we should have a vested interest in our business community. I just need more detail. The details are lacking. So with that, does anyone else have anything to say? Councilman Meltz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I agree with, you were very well spoken as usual, and your points were well made, and I agree with all of them. I have a few other additional comments, if I may. Ms. Lafredo, or Councilman Lafredo, I really appreciate you bringing this initiative forward, because it is extremely important to everybody in the village, and especially, the others who sit with you are also huge supporters and champions of small business, and we're all vested in this. So with that being said, I do want to make sure everybody's aware that less than 2 hours ago, Congress approved another $500 billion to go into the PPP program and other small business relief packages. And that's one thing that we had said at the last time we met together. Let's see what happens in terms of other sources of funding. $500 billion. And I think we all can rest assured, as you said, Councilman Lafredo, Ruth Chris and Shake Shack are not going to be getting that type of money. This is going to go to the small business people. So we encourage everybody, if they haven't filled out their applications, to get on it tonight and make sure all their documents are in place, because funding will be there. Here are some of the numbers, and I, like the mayor and other members of council, spent probably hours on this because it is so important to the health of the village and the welfare of our residents and businesses, is that you realize we have 234 businesses which have storefronts in the village, 234. There's 165 on Northeast 2nd Avenue, 44 on Biscayne Boulevard, and 25 on Park Drive. The skeleton of the proposal doesn't really say anything about anybody else off of 2nd Avenue. And as the mayor said, how can we even consider not helping everybody rather than a select few? And we didn't mention the theater center on 2nd Ave. You didn't mention other nonprofits. What about churches? So there's just so much more information which has to be put out there. And I'm not quite sure, you said professional, would doctors or pediatricians or dentists, would they be? Why not? They're suffering just like everybody else. And what about I think one of the e-commenters said something, they had been paying taxes for 20 years in the Shores. They have their own businesses. It's just not one within the Shores, but they're suffering too. Plenty of people are suffering. And to fund everybody at the levels at which are suggested, I calculated you're looking at over $3.5 million. And if we can just talk briefly of what's coming down the road for us as a village to take care of the residents under current circumstances, we're looking at probably a $500,000 shortfall at least because of gasoline taxes, because nobody's driving, as well as other sales taxes. So that shoe will drop whenever we try to get through this crisis and the pandemic. The budget, we're going to have, just to keep things as a status quo, we're going to have to make up $500,000. Not to mention the increases which are coming to our police department, the pension fund for the city employees, as well as cost of living. So these are things that we're going to have to deal with as we struggle with our budget every year. So I just don't know. Even under, I think you undervalue it at 300, 400,000, but to even pay for that, I am open to anything and everything for the benefit of our residents and these businesses to carry on and continue the unbelievable growth and development that we've been doing. I just, as the mayor said, I don't see anything here how that's been presented, how we could consider anything. Coupled with the ability to now apply for that $500 billion, I would join the mayor's suggestion of maybe reconvening at some later time when, if you are going to provide more information, a more detailed plan. And I will add to what the mayor said about St. Petersburg, and she may or may not know this and not just said that. They're doing this because they're being funded by private business. They got about $10 million from the owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the baseball team and other local corporate entities. It's not coming from their taxes. And everybody knows that we fund everything from our taxes, because as much as we want our business area to be flourishing and grow, we don't make much money from the businesses, right? It's all of us who pay real estate taxes. But Tampa Bay or St. Petersburg and other areas, that's private funding. So I won't monopolize any time. As much as I absolutely feel for everybody, I'm open to anything, but I need to hear some plausible, responsible, and viable options.
Vice Mayor Birch.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying, Councilman Lafredo, in writing his memo, opened a door very wide. And to his credit, he understands the history of the matter of trying to develop Second Avenue. And one of the things I took away from that, first of all, I have tried by my actions way more than my words, and also with my pocket to support Second Avenue in many ways. And really it's my passion, and I feel very strongly about it. I understand the wide breadth of the Chamber's remarks. I'm very grateful to Patrice Gillespie Smith for taking the leadership of the Chamber and for putting together what the Chamber desires. But mostly my heart is aching for my friends on Second Avenue. And I took, because Councilman Alfredo, your proposal was such a wide open door, the part I took to my heart is the part that we have worked so hard to try to develop, which is the Second Avenue corridor, which came alive due to the sewer program. Thus, I don't want to talk all night about this. I just want to throw out a suggestion that could help to put our arms around at least something that we could do that seems to me to be equitable. I don't know if you know this, but in the scheme of things, once we asked our landlords to be part of the sewer project, they had to agree to do sewer maintenance. And right now, the first year of sewer maintenance is due, and soon the second year will be due, the sewer maintenance funds that they will need to pay for as landlords for our businesses on Second Avenue only will be an amount that I thought, in the scheme of things, after thinking very hard, just as everyone else has, because there's so much hurt and difficulty in the daily life of business people right now, including myself. I must say, I applied for the PPP, and I don't have much hope that it's going to end up helping very many of our businesses. I think that money is going to disappear very fast. So I'm tipping my hat to you, Councilman Meltz. I really hope you're right. I really hope that some of that money flows in a more micro funding way than the first did. But these are hopes that we have. What do we have that we could grasp onto that might work for Second Avenue, if that is the part of the door that I feel like I would like to enter? And that is that we, as a village, and these landlords cooperate in the sewer maintenance. Without the sewers, as we knew for many years, 30, like more, without the sewers, we wouldn't have had what we think is the beginnings of an admirable rebirth. So we take the funds that they would owe for the first 2 years, which is somewhere about, Tom, would you? Yes.
The annual expense is $85,492.
Yes, but per landlord, maintenance.
It's a little over $3,000, about $3,120.
$3,120 per year, and I'm talking about 2 years worth because I think that would be just such a small amount. But anyway, this is just talking. So you take that money and you say to the landlord, who we have a relationship with because we must continue together to maintain the sewers. If you give rent refunds to your restaurants and retail in your buildings, with these funds, we will forgive your 2 years of sewer maintenance. This allows the landlord to split the money evenly, or however the landlord decides, perhaps, but that they would need to prove to the village that they forgave the rent to restaurants and retail. The total amount, which Mr. Benton just mentioned, was in the $80,000 range, is what I consider to be affordable when I looked at the budget. And that's the other thing, Councilman Alfredo. that has got us so concerned. You know, not only have we had this extra expense with the country club, but going beyond that, we have had many extra expenses. But the big thing is if we had that $3 million of FEMA money, which we are lacking, we would have the kinds of savings where we would feel like these other cities. And again, thanks to the leadership at the chamber for giving me the example of Winter Park. Not only do they have a CRA, but they also have some funds in reserve that their chamber was able to match. They're about 3 times the size of ours. But there are things that we can do. And I thought this was one thing that we could do. It may seem paltry, but from the public commenters and from the business owners and leaders that are listening to this, and just start throwing the eggs, because I'll just sit here and cry with you. And I know that we need to have some kind of solution. We are a small village. We are doing a very unlikely thing for a municipal budget. We have no budgeted item that I can identify in looking at the budget book that could possibly fund this by shifting funds. If there is such a way that we could identify those funds, then great. But from what I understand from discussions with management, I don't think there are, because what are they getting ready to do? Write a new budget. That new budget is going to have to accommodate the needs of our residents and businesses and our village. If we don't, and we have to cut services, if we have to say to someone who's concerned about crime because people are wandering into the neighborhood, we're going to have to cut by 1 police officer, that's not putting us in a place where we responsibly should be, in my opinion. So I'm looking at this idea. It was something that came to me after long thought. I do feel that it's a bad time to ask the landlords to give money into the village. So for starters, you can actually say, we could relieve 2 years of your sewer maintenance fees. We would pay that. You show us you've given rent relief to your restaurants and retail. It's something. It keeps it on 2nd Avenue. It contains the wide open door. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilman Lafredo.
Yes, I'll take the last first. I think that's an admirable idea, Vice Mayor. The only problem I have with it is it would be very difficult to police to see who's actually giving rent rebates or not. If there was another way to sequester that 85,000 and then for the village to pass it out. Let me finish. I do evictions as a matter of my law practice, and for federal buildings or federally insured loans on office buildings or commercial buildings, there's a 6-month moratorium in place, or a 120-day moratorium, and there's no evictions going forward. We're going to be seeing a lot of evictions in the fall. So even though my business is flat right now, I'm not worried, because gruesome as it is, there's going to be plenty of business for evictions coming in the fall. That said, with regard to Councilman Meltz's comments, this was, and I'll get to a point that I want to make when I address the mayor's comments. The $350 billion lasted about 72 hours. I would be agreeable to wait to see if it lasts, this $500 billion lasts, say, 120 hours, and so set a special council meeting to discuss this matter further in 7 days, so a week from today, to see whether anybody got any money. As far as I know, nobody locally got any money and everybody applied. I was actually in a real estate council of lawyers, and I was embarrassed to find out that almost every one of the 40 of them applied for the PPP. I did not. I have what's called a credit card loan that I use when I get in trouble, and I don't intend to go to the public trough. That said, but I'd be happy to postpone this discussion for 7 days to see whether anybody got any benefit. With regard to the mayor's comments, where, this is a lifeline we're trying to throw. The village, using its emergency powers, just spent $40,000 a month of unbudgeted money to bail out the country club, because the country club was threatening to shut off the water sprinklers if we didn't. So That said, this is a lifeline to local businesses. I have one advantage over most of you in that I was on 2nd Avenue in the bad old days when we had the theater with the robberies and the drug dealings and all those kinds of things. And I don't want to go back to that. But I'm willing to, if you're willing to put it off 1 week, I'm willing to table my proposal for now and come back in a week and see if what Councilman Meltz has said has borne fruit and that 500 billion has gotten trickled down to the local area. And we may not need to have any further discussion. And I would be loving that. I hope that would happen. I don't think it's going to happen though.
Okay. I too have an interest in Northeast 2nd. I'm not certainly suggesting that your idea in theory isn't great, because it is. What I'm saying is I need more detail and more clarity on what the criteria is going to be. How do we determine it? Who administers it? If we can help, we should try to find a way to do that. But we should find a way to do it that makes sense for the village and as a whole. So all I'm saying is, you're doing the right thing. It is the right thing to try to do. But I would like to see some more detail into how we do it. How do we implement it? How do we administer it? What is the criteria going to be? That's one. Two, if this is something we want to implement, I need to hear from our staff as to what is a viable amount. I mean, again, I have to agree. We do have some things coming down the line. And by the way, the country clubs is our asset. But we do have some things coming down the line that we need to prepare for budget-wise. So I'm not suggesting that throw the baby out with the bathwater. What I'm suggesting is that we look at something that is viable and makes sense, if we can do that. And so I don't know if you heard the last part of what I said is that I would recommend that I would love for the manager to come back, go and look and see if he can find a source of funding that makes sense or that can fit with the needs of the village. But even through that, we still need to come up with the criteria. And what would that look like? Who would administer this? How do you go about applying? Who can apply? What are the parameters? I just need more detail. And as to Vice Mayor Birch's idea, I love it. I think anything we can do to assist, I think that's a great idea. I don't know the law, so I have to talk to our attorney around that. But I mean, and if they would use that money to forgive rent for the folks that are on Northeast 2nd, great. But I don't know the ramifications for that. And that's why I was suggesting calling an emergency meeting so that if we come back, and I'm not suggesting calling an emergency meeting next week so we can wait to see if anybody got money from the SBA or the EDIL loans. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that so that we can come up with something that makes sense, or that we can hear from our administration as to what perhaps could make sense, or so that we perhaps as council members can present some other viable ideas to each other to come up with a possible solution to help our small business community. That's what I was suggesting a special meeting for, if the council is up for that. I think we should be looking into Vice Mayor Birch's idea. I think it's incumbent upon us to all try to find meaningful, creative solutions to help our business community. But again, we'd have to come up with criteria, and it has to be narrowly tailored. I mean, I don't know if you looked at the proposal and the different proposals around the state, but they're narrowly tailored. They have set details. They have set requirements as to what you have to do to get the money. I mean, it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that we need to look into. So I'm certainly not knocking your proposal as a whole, because I understand what you are trying to do, and it is, in fact, in theory, the right thing to do. It's just, how do we get there, and what is reasonable, and what makes sense? That's the point I'm trying to make. So what I guess I would say is, I would suggest, or I'm not even sure of the language of how to say this, Mr. Attorney, but I would like to direct the manager to come back to us with the source of funding, look for a source of funding, at least bring that back to us to tell us what's possibly reasonable or feasible. I would like to see some creativity perhaps in what we could do to help that makes sense for us as a village, the size of our village and the realities of our village. And I think, depending on the legalities, I think Vice Mayor Birch's suggestion is also one worth looking into. And I don't think we can afford to wait till our next village meeting. I think it's important that we have these discussions to try to find a viable solution if we can. But it has to be a lot more streamlined than what's being proposed now. And we have to think about the taxpayers as a whole. So how do we do that?
Madam Mayor?
Yes. Madam Clerk.
For your motion in progress.
Yes.
Are you proposing a time certain for the special meeting or leaving it open until such parameters are established?
Well, if I am proposing a time certain first. Well, Mr. Serafin, let's hear from the city attorney first. Thank you. Mr. Serafin?
What I'm hearing is the policy guidelines for such program or programs is in flux and has not yet congealed among you all. Each of you have identified a large number of important issues that need to be addressed, hashed out, and decisions made as to what should the village policy be.
Right.
After that's done, to the extent that there is a path forward, we can then start crafting ways to get there. My first suggestion is whatever meeting you're anticipating having should be a workshop meeting. So you can knock all of these issues around and see if you can reach a consensus about what to do. The second thing I'd like to suggest is that you wait until staff has been able to get their arms around you some good information. No sense having a workshop before you've gotten the information. The third thing I'd like to address is Vice Mayor Birch's suggestion, which does have some logistical issues, but I think they could be worked around. You're on the verge in the next meeting or two, I don't know exactly when it's scheduled, of being asked to pass an ordinance putting these annual maintenance expenses on the tax bill as special assessments. So you have two options. You can either not do that, in which case all of the landlords in the district, which is basically Second Avenue, will get that benefit without any guarantees that they'll pass it along to tenants. Or you could pass it, put it on the tax bills, in which event they'll have to pay it, and then work out some sort of rebate system for maintenance assessments actually paid after they're paid, to the extent that they were paid, and to the extent that they can prove that they've made rent abatements, at least in those amounts. We need to talk about what type of proof is acceptable. And also, there's an issue, landlord has 10 tenants. If he's got a $3,000 maintenance bill, what if he gives one tenant a $3,000 abatement and nothing to the others? I mean, there's just more issues to discuss, the apportionment of that. But from a practical standpoint, I think the path forward has been started today. Identify the issues, get the information as best we can. Perhaps we can reach out and get, for the benefit of your guidance, some of these, some paper on the programs in other cities that have gone this way. Certainly Tom's got a job ahead of him trying to identify funding. And then have your policy decisions made. And again, I recommend that be done at a workshop. And it's certainly awkward on Zoom, but I think we have to do the best we can. And that's the path forward.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Birch, yes.
I just wanted to make clear that loan administration costs money as well. So that has to be figured into any time that you're going to make loans. It's going to be, to me, more complicated than having landlords prove that they've given rent allowances to their tenants. To me, that sounds like a much simpler thing to do than paying a bank 0.25% in order to administer per year to administer a loan, or it makes a lot. It just makes a lot more sense. It is simpler, and that is, I think, the argument for it. How much you do is dependent, again, on the research into the budget. What I understand from my conversations with the manager is that they would just go out and borrow the money, thus hitting the lid. We borrowed a lot of money. We have borrowed $1 million for the pool. We have expenses that we are in the pipeline that we can't take back now, and we have to see those projects through. And that's my big concern, because I think that the only realistic way to come up with the kinds of amounts that either the chamber was recommending or that even Mr. Lafredo was recommending in his proposal. I mean, we're pushing on $500,000 here that we're going to give away as loans. If you want to do that, I mean, I'm not going to dig my heels in the sand and go away kicking and screaming, because I'll love it for our businesses. But then what if something happens and we don't have the reserves that we need? And that is a real concern of mine. And also to have these with these interest amounts. So further, the research is on the part of staff. Oh, we didn't spend money on this because of COVID, or we spent less on this than we intended. So we have reserves from this year's budget. That's what I'm looking for to see. And could we loan that with minimum amounts of staff time? Because our staff is already booked out with a lot of obligations. And that always concerns me too. Putting extra work on staff that is really of unknown origin. And do we have a loan administrator on staff? I don't think so.
Mr. Lafredo.
Yes. That what I know about commercial landlords and tenants, I would second a little bit of what the city attorney said. It's going to be very difficult to trace that down and find out. And talk about loan administration when you're dealing with 100 different or 200 different tenants and 200 different leases on 2nd Avenue. Let's say for that, trying to track and see who got $50 here and $75 there. I think your idea is a great one, but I think it should be done in a different manner. I think that money should be taken back from the landlords, from the city, and used directly. So the $85,000 comes out from the city. If it can be done, I don't know. But with regard to the program, I'm very willing to not go forward with my proposal at this time if we can identify some of the ideas that the mayor was suggesting to tighten it up a little bit and to get some criteria. But I want to point out something else that was said. Somebody said that we had to do this for the country club because it's an asset. I would say it's a tangible asset, but there's things called intangible assets. I live near 2nd Avenue and I walk there all the time. My business is there. 2nd Avenue is an intangible asset. Even though we don't own it, we own it. And we have to preserve and protect it. And this is a once in a lifetime event. I'm 67 years old. I never went through anything like this in my life. I hope never to go through it again. And I think we have to look at it as an emergency. These are loans. We're going to get this money back, whether we have to go and talk to Donald Trump or whatever we have to do. But we're going to get it back. But we need to give these people a lifeline now while they're in need. And that's all I have.
So thank you. I think we have to be mindful when we're talking about our reserves. So let me make it clearer as to what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that what you've presented, what Councilman Lafredo has presented to us, is an idea with no detail in terms of streamlining it and making it plausible and feasible and having it make sense for our business community as a whole. Our reserves is one thing. I think what I was sort of looking at is I know there are creative mechanisms and ways out there that we might be able to help. And I'm not sure that that comes from our reserves, because I too am concerned about the long-term what we're going to need our reserves for later coming down the pike after this has passed. We're going to be faced with a lot of additional challenges. But I guess what I'm trying to suggest is that, is it possible for us to find creative solutions to look into? I'm not saying it's going to work, but can we look into some creative solutions or ideas that may be floating around out there and bring it back and amongst ourselves and find something that maybe we can agree on, at the same time being mindful of taxpayers' money, being mindful of our reserves, being mindful of the community as a whole, being mindful of the businesses, how we're going to pick and choose, being mindful of a criteria. I just think this is one thing, but it has to be thought through and it has to make sense. So I guess I'm just trying to find creative ways. And if they're out there, great, we should try to at least look into it. And if it had more detail to it, that's one thing, but it doesn't. So because time is of the essence and because this is a very important issue and because we are at unprecedented times, I thought we could come back as a body, time certain, if Mr. Seraphin says that's going to be okay, I would say next week, end of next week, with some potential ideas and solutions to bandy about with each other, since we can't, we have to do it together in the sunshine. I just think it's that important. And if we can find something we can come together on, good, but it's worth a valiant effort, I think, from all of us. Vice Mayor Birch?
Here with you, this program from Winter Park, because it is a program. It is, I think, Madam Mayor, the kinds of closed loop ideas that you were espousing. And it starts out with their utilities. In Winter Park, they have their own utilities, so they can do utility forgiveness. And I should mention to the whole group that FPL is doing a 25% rebate beginning May 1. You will have a 25% lower electric bill because of a way they're structuring so that they would get the maximum amount during this difficult time to the consumer. So that is one part of the program. So what they tried to do is do things that were realistic, that were already kind of on the table. So they had a way of forgiving late fees, which of course with FPL we don't. And unless you apply for an extreme hardship, you can't get the late fees forgiven. So that was one part. Another part was microloans. And these were loans of $5,000 that they funded with their own money. And they gave $5,000 to each of the businesses. They didn't need to be in the CRA district. They didn't need to be chamber members in order to get it. They just got $5,000 for as much as that would help. So that was part of the program. The other thing that they did that was very interesting, which is a good segue into my agenda item coming up next, is they did a food and hunger support, and they emphasized that they gave free Wi-Fi connectivity. That was another thing that they did that was part of a program of trying to help the businesses and the residents at the same time. And then the last thing that I thought that was worth mention is that they gave rewards for energy efficiency, which FPL already does, and which, of course, since we're trying to be more green all the time, maybe that could be part of the program. Some kind of a business rebate if they pledge to be a green business program, a green business facility. So those are just a few of what I thought was an excellent proposal from Winter Park, which I will send you. So thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll conclude my thoughts by just saying, I am concerned about our reserves as well. When I'm asking to look at other opportunities and ideas, I'm trying to think outside the box and look creative methods. Are there partnerships that we could be having with private industry that could be helpful to us? I don't know. Mr. Manager?
Yes, ma'am. Since we've talked about the reserves, let me just in rough numbers, if I could, just get it on the record here for you tonight and see where we're at as of today. again, in round numbers, we have approximately $5 million in the bank of cash reserves. Each year between October, November, and most of December, the village has a cash flow issue. The tax money is not rolling in at that time. So we have to go to the bank and we have to get money out of the bank in order to meet our obligations. And that's about $4 million of operating cash that we need for those 3 months. Okay. Now, I hate to say this. I'm almost don't want to jinx this, but in about 40 days, hurricane season starts. All right. We need to have money in the bank for a hurricane. Right now, we do, of course. When Irma came through here, and that wasn't really a hurricane, we spent over $3.5 million, of which FEMA hasn't reimbursed us yet. And I doubt anytime soon we're going to see it, since the entire country is marred in this COVID crisis, and everybody's going to FEMA for everything right now. So it's doubtful we're going to see that money anytime soon. God forbid we have a hurricane on top of this cash flow situation. You know, we could be like other cities around here, having to borrow money to get out, you know, to pick debris up in our streets out there. You know, now, you know, I'm not saying obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but the forecasters are predicting a very active hurricane season. So, you know, I just want to let you know that's the reserve position we find ourselves in. Obviously, if FEMA would have reimbursed us for our Irma expenses, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It wouldn't be that big of a deal for us. You know, we could find the money. A question, if I may, to the Vice Mayor: this proposal to forgive the sewer maintenance expenses, that's in lieu of Mr. Lafredo's proposal. Am I correct on that?
That was my intent, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Vice Mayor Birch.
So just one more thing. I did ask the attorney if it was to his the best of his knowledge, and he consulted, I believe, with another attorney, and they both felt that this was not something that could necessarily lead to a lawsuit. Whereas on a loan program and making a decision about a loan program would be more difficult to navigate in terms of administering. Did you say that, or?
Not exactly that way. I thought it would be far less likely to lead to a lawsuit than some of the other suggestions on the table. I haven't consulted with the bond lawyer, the assessment lawyer that's really handling the assessment matter. Have you, Tom? That looks like a yes.
Yes, I did. I spoke to him today, who handled our downtown sewer project, and he was comfortable with it. He did not see any legal ramifications. In fact, other places have in fact done this.
Yeah, from a logistical standpoint, we can't use money that's special assessment money for anything other than the special assessments. So it sounds like what you're saying is we pass the special assessments, they pay the special assessments. To the extent that money's been paid, we can then use our money, separate money, to rebate that essentially to the landlords, subject to certain conditions that they give rate abatements, etc.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor,
Madam Clerk.
if the council were to have a council workshop on the 28th of April, Tuesday, I would need at least 48 hours to post a notice and publish the agenda to allow the public to view supporting documentation, which means I would need any research information no later than Sunday morning, this coming Sunday morning, the 26th, just for the record.
Thank you. So maybe given that, we could, Mr. Sheriffman, were you going to say something?
Well, it's just The 28th seems awfully close to May. When's our first meeting in May?
That's what I was going to ask.
May 5th.
May 5th. I mean, we've had workshop meetings on the same day as regular meetings before, but it's your pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, I think May 5th, we leave it unless anybody, it's so close in that day. And I think I want people to have time to gather information or to gather thoughts. I don't want to rush it, but I mean, I don't want to rush the compilation of information.
Okay,
Yes,
so
Vice Mayor Birch?
We have to be faster than the SBA. I do have a conflict.
That won't
on
be hard.
April 28th. I'm just trying to joke. I have a conflict on April 28th. I can't do that.
Okay. Mr. LaFredo?
Since the Vice Mayor has a conflict on the 28th, I would vote for May the 5th because we need her there.
Really comes down to one question. You want to add a workshop to the May 5th, or you just want to do it all at your regular meeting?
thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Yes. I mean,
Part of the advantage of a workshop is a little less formal. We're all in the same room and we can exchange ideas. I'm not sure how much of that benefit we get on Zoom.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to do it on Zoom, I think, for sure. I think also the benefit of a workshop is to bring in see if we can bring in ideas and come up with a collective solution, if that's possible. Listen, whatever the will of the council is, but I think collecting information, if there's a way, again, if there's a way, I think we should try to explore. And again, I'm talking about creative ideas. I'm mindful of the reserves. I'm not suggesting it should come from there, but maybe there are other models that we haven't taken a look at that we could use. Yes, Councilman Brady.
Hi, I just wanted to very, briefly mention that I think we want to, regardless, urge the business community to pursue all avenues that are available today. Reach out to Small Business Development Center at FIU, to Beacon Council, help get guidance applying for loans, because the resources required to address this are so much beyond, I think, what we will be able to muster. And I can't imagine us, providing any kind of assistance, regardless of what we come up to somebody who hasn't, attempted to get that funding and been formally rejected. I know it's a burden. My heart goes out to all these people. I really, I appreciate the Councilman LaFredo thinking this through and bringing it to us. I very much doubt that we're going to be able to do much here. This is something that's affecting everyone across the country. And like I know people had mentioned before that while some of these businesses are absolutely suffering and struggling, many of our residents and homeowners are also suffering and struggling. And I think we're going to have to really be focused on them and on the village's own finances going forward. But so regardless, I think I absolutely agree that we need to be creative and we need to try to think of what we can, but I think we need to make sure that we're giving guidance to the business community to get out there and try everything you can, because we're absolutely going to, at a minimum, be looking for like formal rejection, I think, for any kind of assistance that we would provide. That's all I wanted to mention right now.
That goes to the issue of criteria, right? Councilman Meltz?
Madam Mayor, what I was going to suggest is that just for focused purposes, I would suggest doing a workshop 1 hour before our regular scheduled meeting on May 5th, say 5:30, so we know we're there to work and focus on this rather than just letting it get subsumed within our ordinary meeting.
Yeah. I like that idea. If the will of the council is that, I do agree with that idea. At least we can talk through this and see if there's a viable solution, and there may not be, but we should take the time to sort of hash it out amongst ourselves if we can.
Okay.
So is everybody in agreement that on the Madam Clerk, May 5th?
May 5th, just to, and in the interest of time and mitigating any confusion, there would have to be 2 agendas one for the council workshop, one for the council meeting, and then there would have to be 2 Zoom meetings. I think that for the purpose of efficiency and in the interest of time and mitigating any confusion with the public, if it's the pleasure of the council, if we could just keep it at the May 5th council meeting,
Right.
as opposed to having a council workshop followed by the regularly scheduled council meeting.
Madam Clerk, would you be able to rearrange the agenda so once Madam Mayor begins the meeting, we can go straight to the workshop and then let it be followed by the regular agenda?
The way we do a budget hearing and
Right.
then the
Right.
regular meeting.
I do too. So what I normally do is that I advise the mayor to let me know when it's over so I can stop the recording and start over, because the council has like the village attorney mentioned, it's more formal. So it's a different process. Workshops, you don't need motions. You can't take motions during a workshop. Or a council meeting, things are usually passed by consensus and or motion. So to differentiate that, we can make it happen if it's the pleasure of the council. And still then, we don't know what's going to happen with virtual meetings either, because on May 1st, Executive Order 2069 expires. And we're still waiting to see if the governor is going to extend that particular executive order that allows the council or governing body to meet via virtual means as well.
Okay.
Guess we'll play it by ear on that. Is it the pleasure of the council to do, however we can work it out, at least do a 1-hour workshop on May 5th?
Yes.
Prior
Yes.
to, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, just for the record, the motion in progress is to postpone the discussion item and call a May 5th council workshop prior to the May 5th council meeting to further discuss the establishment of an emergency loan fund for businesses, with more specificity on the various small business funding programs that are expected to become available in the upcoming days, to provide more information on the administration criteria and available village funding sources researched by the village manager, and to provide creative mechanisms offered by individual council members regarding such emergency loan funding sources.
I would add, or alternative funding source.
That's what I was going to say, or alternative funding sources. Yes. Yes.
So noted.
Great.
Yes. So, Mr. Attorney, do we vote on
I
it?
suggest someone says, so moved.
I
move the motion.
Madam Mayor, I have you started the motion. I'm lacking a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Lafredo,
Yes.
Councilman Brady,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Birch,
Yes.
Councilman Meltz,
Yes.
Mayor Wagger.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 7B, discussion and possible action about having the village or the village council host a farm share event. This item is sponsored by Vice Mayor Birch.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, I have spoken with the manager. He has spoken with Farm Share, so I'll let him outline what he found out when he talked to Farm Share about coming into our region for a Farm Share event. Mr. Benton?
Yes, ma'am. I have spoken to Farm Share twice now. We are on the quote list. Most jurisdictions are in fact doing a farm share program. Basically what this is people, farmers that have excess fruits and vegetables, they work with this group, they bag it up, they bring it to your community in a truck. You as the sponsor, meaning us, the village, we will have to have the manpower to form the lines and control the lines with the vehicles. You've got to do it in your car. With this COVID, you've got to be very careful. You don't come in contact with anybody. You put the bags in the trunk of the people's cars. It cannot be for village residents only. It's for everybody. It's first come, first serve. In talking to some of my colleagues that have done this before, I'll just give you the example of Cutler Bay. I spoke to them down there. They advertised for like 9 in the morning. At 2 in the morning, cars were lining up. They had 1,000 cars in line, and they only had enough food for 300. So then obviously they had to disperse all those people that didn't get the food. I would recommend that since it's not a residents-only program, that I reach out to Barry University and ask them if we can use that large parking lot across the street from the charter school, which we've used in the past during hurricanes to distribute ice and water out of. There's enough stacking space in that general area there to form a queue to come in and out of the gate system there to pick the food up. As soon as they get back to me and I have a specific date, of course, we can then work out the exact logistics on the date of when we can do this.
So I'll just ask how my colleagues feel about having a farm share event.
Mr. Lafredo?
But I think it's a great idea.
I do too, Vice Mayor Birch. I do too. Be supportive of that. Yeah. So do we just wait until, Mr. Manager, do we wait? Since we are on the list, we just have to wait till.
I will keep calling them, and I will
Okay.
let them know how, that the council's feelings, that you all are excited about having this event, and see what I can do to move it up and get a specific date.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have one thing not related to this, but going back to the previous issue, and that is that when you use the word emergency, we're trying to any creative plan that we come up with has to be able to be administered fairly quickly. Otherwise, we're falling in the same category that any other government assistance is falling into. And that is why when my colleagues are thinking about what are good solutions, one reason that people came to us after having such an experience with the government loan program is because they're planning that this loan would be immediate. And I think we have to keep that in mind when we're doing our creative thinking prior to the workshop. Something that could be administered quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is announcements. This is an update provided by the village manager regarding COVID-19.
Madam Mayor, Council. So let me just bring you up to date on a couple of things. Obviously, COVID-19 is still a threat to our community. Stay at home and stay safe is still in effect. Obviously, you can go outside and walk your dog and things like that, but the health officials are still asking that we practice social distancing. We stay at least 6 feet apart. We've got to continue to wear face masks whenever you go inside of a store, and continue to have proper hand sanitation. Wash your hands frequently. Now, realizing that this thing has gone on now, what are we into, week 5 or 6? People are obviously going outside. They've been, cooped up in their homes for over a month now, and the county mayor, Mayor Jimenez, has set up a group of task force, if you will, to see about getting people outside and into some activities. And so he set up a task force to open up our park system countywide, marinas and boat ramps, and golf courses. And so I've been participating in these basic phone conversations and webinars that have been going on. And there's a possibility as early as this Friday that the park system may be open again. It hasn't been official yet. Of course, we're monitoring this. And if this occurs, there's going to be absolute strict enforcement of social distance rules. And for our particular community, obviously the Bayfront Park could be open again. The rec field could be open again, Constitution Park. However, the tot lot cannot be open because the disease lives on metal and on surfaces, and there's no way we could disinfect that often enough to make that happen. And also, we would keep the basketball court closed. We have problems during normal times of maintaining distances and things with a basketball court, so we wouldn't open our basketball court, but we could open our tennis court for singles only. We can't play double tennis, but we could do singles. And also, the golf courses have advised me that they would be ready to open if the mayor gives the official word and allows this to happen. Golf would be different as we know it. There would only be one person riding per cart. The pin would be, the cup that holds the pin would be turned upside down, or else they would put something in the cup to prevent the ball from going inside. There would be no, obviously, bar service or 19th hole, if you will. You won't be allowed inside the pro shop and other that to ensure that people keep their distance. So that's kind of, I think, exciting news and getting us back on some sort of normalcy. We'll know as the week progresses, and obviously we'll put all this out on social media as soon as we know, and we'll get the word out. As it stands right now, all village buildings remain closed. However, all of our employees are here and have been here. And if I may, Madam Mayor, I just want to give a shout out to our employees. They have been absolutely great through all this. A lot of people have been home working virtually, or they've been sitting at home getting paid. Our people have been here every day. Our building department is still making inspections every day. The ladies, all of our permit clerks are there. Now we're taking in permits virtually, but before that, they were taking in permits one at a time, and we kept the building department and still have the building department up and running. So I'm very proud of our staff. Of course, police are out there every day. Public Works is out there every day doing their normal job. And so life goes on here in the village, and I just want to thank all of our employees for doing such an outstanding job. As far as building permits go, you can go to our website at www.msvfl.gov and go to the permit quick link, then go to the online services tab for the Citizen Service Portal, or CSS, and that will allow you to begin the process to apply for a building permit. So again, I just want to thank the community. Everybody has been pulling together here, and I just want everybody to remember it's not over. Unfortunately, there's still people dying out there, but I think we flattened out. And so if we practice social distancing, continue following the rules the health department and CDC has put in place, hopefully we can get out of this sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is Village Council comments.
Let's start at the bottom with Councilman Meltz. You have any comments?
Oh, I'm on the top on my screen.
Oh, you're on the bottom of mine. I apologize.
Okay. No. I the only thing I do want to echo what Mr. Benton said, because, our garbage is still being picked up. The police are out there. I mean, the rest of the folks with the building and inspections, and it's pretty amazing. It just shows you the quality of the people that we have within the village, and I am greatly appreciative of all the hard work they're continuing to do. And I want to thank the rest of the council for all the work that you're doing too. And I appreciate the support on the single plastic bottle ordinance. And I want to thank Mr. Seraphin and his staff for all the work behind the scenes that they've done, the back and forth of the red line versions. And I want to thank the contributions of the Florida Beverage Association and their attorney, Joseph Salzberg. because they are trying to help an issue with recycling, and they weren't trying to oppose us. They were just trying to assist. And hopefully we can see some dramatic effects, and we move forward with our agenda once we get past this to make this a greener, safer place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Brady?
Yeah, I just want to, again, also thank, the staff, village staff have been wonderful working, through this whole thing, keeping the village working well. And definitely want to, reassure all of our residents that the police are in full force. They are patrolling your neighborhoods. They're doing a great job. And just like the people in the back office are keeping everything working, our public works people are, moving your trash, keeping our recycling going. Everybody's doing a great job. We really appreciate it. Just urge everyone to continue to use, best, most safe practices they can so that we can get through this as quickly as possible. I think the more we deviate from that guidance, the longer this thing is going to drag out and the more misery there will be. Just take care of yourself, love your families, love your neighbors, and know that we'll all get through this working together. And thank you to the council and to, Councilman Lafredo for really trying to think outside the box about how we can try to address, the really serious needs of our residents and businesses in a time like this. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Birch?
Thank the village clerk for the hard work of putting together a Zoom meeting for the first time, as well as Lisa Keeley, who's been operating so well these mute buttons. And I do appreciate the background that she had to enable this to go off so smoothly. So, and I have definitely been in Zoom meetings that are a little bit less smooth than this one. So I do appreciate the skill that went into that. And since you were giving shout out to people and our services, I just have to tell you, I love the street sweeper. And it's been around, and it's mahogany tree season, no matter what other season it is. Then they just work so hard with that street sweeper, and I love it. So I just wanted to say, Public Works, thank you for all the great work. And one other thing I wanted to mention that is a concern of mine is I think forward out of the house, out of the quarantine, that everyone is going to be trying to reschedule their events. And they're going to be doing it without the framework that we usually have of the seasons. And I'm wondering if our communications director and maybe the chamber director and a few other leaders around town can cooperate together to make sure that that calendar comes together in a way that can be manageable for people. And so as I think about it, I know, for example, the chamber has rescheduled a couple of things. I know we are going to be, and to make that calendar work requires that cooperation. So I just thought I'd mention it. So thank you very much for tonight, and I appreciate it.
Very good, thank you. Councilman Lafredo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to second what everybody said about our wonderful staff, especially Public Works. They're out there in the trenches every day. They're doing a great job. The last thing I want to say is a client of mine, an old friend, is an ER doctor at Jackson. And he didn't get into detail yesterday in our discussion, but I just want to echo what the village manager said about let's keep maintaining the social distance. Let's stay safe. Let's everybody take care of themselves. This is no easy thing to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for, I have to thank the clerk, and I do have to thank Lisa for getting this virtual meeting going smoothly. I apologize for myself being late, but thank you for your hard work on this. I'd also like to thank the staff that has been working here in the village. It's amazing. I understand that, Sean, I understand that. We enjoy very good services, and that hasn't stopped. And so I know a lot of my neighbors appreciate it, and the community appreciates it, and folks have been working really hard to make sure that village's services are flowing nicely, and that is greatly appreciated. So thank you. On a good news note, for the census, Miami Shores, while we were #1 at some point, we are #3 in self-reporting responses by municipal. We are #3 out of 34 municipalities. So I'm very, very proud of Miami Shores residents for getting their information in. It's going to help us funding coming down the line. We are behind Palmetto Bay and Pinecrest. We were number 1 2 weeks ago, but I'm very proud. So if you haven't gotten your census, if you haven't done it online, you can do it online. Please go online and fill it out if you haven't done it already. Keep us in that top 3. Very proud of our residents for making sure to take care of this very important census data information. And I also want to close by saying, look, we are in challenging times, and no one's ever been through this. It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. So as we fight to get through it, I just hope that we all act with kindness and compassion and understanding for one another, and understanding that a lot of us, a lot of our neighbors are struggling or hurt. So please be mindful of your neighbors. If you see anybody in need, please, certainly let me know if we can be helpful, but be on the lookout for what's going on in your community. Likewise, I empathize, and I'm deeply saddened about what's going on in our business community, but I hope that collectively we are rallying around them at home, ordering out, taking virtual classes, whatever it is we can do to support them from our homes would be greatly appreciated. And if there's a way that we can come together and figure out how to help them going forward outside of the loan programs that I'm hoping they're all applying for. The second tranche of money is coming. So if you are in the SBA queue, call your bank, see where you are on the queue, because if you haven't gotten anything, you're still able to if you've already applied. They're just waiting. So I want to be mindful of that. And I thank Councilman Lafredo for offering something for us to consider and giving us his thoughts. And that's very important. So thank you guys for this virtual meeting. Thank you for everybody that did virtual comments. And thank you, Mr. Seraphin, for all your wise counsel. And we'll see you at the next village meeting. Any other comments? There being no further business of the council, this meeting is therefore adjourned. Thank you.